Imagine a boy, barely 12, his wrists ending in scarred stumps where hands should be, yet from those ruins emerge paintings that rival Rembrandt's divine light. In the blood-soaked ashes of 1865 Virginia, this enslaved child's art whispered of sins unforgiven, drawing collectors into a web of obsession and terror. But what if the brushstrokes hid a secret so profane, it invited God's own retribution? In the fading twilight of the American Civil War, as the Confederacy gasped its final breaths amid the scorched earth of Virginia, a miracle or perhaps a curse unfolded on the crumbling grounds of Thornwood Plantation. It was April 1865, and the air hung heavy with the acrid scent of defeat, gunpowder lingering from distant battles, the rot of untended fields, and the faint, metallic tang of blood from soldiers who had staggered homeward, their uniforms tattered like shrouds. Richmond, the once proud capital of rebellion, lay in ruins, its streets choked with rubble and the ghosts of fallen ideals. Amid this desolation, a whisper spread through the salons and churches of high society, a tale so improbable, so laced with the supernatural, that it blurred the line between divine inspiration and diabolical fraud. Picture the scene: a prestigious gallery in Richmond, its walls lined with gilt frames that caught the weak sunlight filtering through soot-streaked windows. 17 oil paintings materialized there, unannounced, like apparitions from a fever dream. Each canvas depicted biblical epics: Abraham's sacrifice, the temptation in the garden, Judas's betrayal, rendered with a mastery that evoked the old masters. Rembrandt's golden glow infused the shadows, Caravaggio's chiaroscuro carved figures from inky blackness, and the Dutch precision of Vermeer captured fabrics so lifelike you could almost feel the coarse weave of linen robes. Critics, those arbiters of taste who had survived the war's privations, murmured comparisons in hushed awe. The brushwork danced with light, anatomy pulsed with lifelike vitality, and the compositions pulsed with an emotional depth that stirred the soul, as if the artist had peered into the abyss of human suffering and painted its echoes. Yet, the artist remained anonymous, a shadow without form. Rumors ignited like wildfire in dry tobacco leaves. In the dim parlors of Richmond's elite, where crystal decanters clinked nervously in candle, flames guttered in draughts, voices dropped to conspiratorial whispers. "It's a boy," they said, "an enslaved lad from out west, no more than 13. But the detail that chilled the blood? He had no hands. His arms ended in blunt, scarred stumps, relics of some childhood horror lost to the annals of plantation cruelty. How, then, could he wield a brush? How could such perfection emerge from imperfection?" Viewers reported an unease, a prickling at the nape of the neck, as if the paintings held a gaze of their own, judging, accusing, hinting at sins buried deep in the southern soul. These works vanished as swiftly as they appeared, within 3 moons of their debut. Buyers, gripped by a sudden revulsion, consigned them to flames or locked them in attics where dust and forgetfulness could claim them. The gallery proprietor met an end the papers deemed tragic and abrupt, a fall from his balcony under a starless sky, his neck snapped like a brittle twig. And the plantation? Thornwood burned one sweltering July night, flames roaring like the wrath of an Old Testament god, devouring barns, quarters, and secrets alike. For generations, the story lingered as spectral fragments, a faded letter in a family trunk, a diary entry scrawled in trembling script, oral histories passed in the hush of midnight gatherings. Ancestors swore they'd witnessed the impossible, their eyes wide with the memory of art that seemed to breathe, to condemn. But now, in our modern age of unearthed truths, a trove has surfaced from the dusty archives of a Richmond attorney's descendants. Yellowed letters, sworn affidavits, the meticulous journal of a Yankee officer amid Reconstruction's chaos. Pieced together, they reveal the full, harrowing saga of Thornwood Plantation, a labyrinth of exploitation, madness, and a ruse so cunning it ensnared scholars, soldiers, and souls alike. At its heart, a boy named Josiah, the handless prodigy, and the web of deceit spun by his master, a man teetering on ruin's edge. This is no mere tale of art, it's a meditation on guilt's shadow, sin's inheritance, and the biblical reckoning that awaits those who play God with the vulnerable. Prepare to descend into this abyss, where beauty masks brutality, and creation courts damnation. Before we plunge deeper into the shadowed corridors of Thornwood, pause with me. If stories like this, where history's veil lifts to reveal the divine and the damned, stir your spirit, join our fellowship. Subscribe, ring the bell, and let these narratives haunt your feed. And tell me in the comments, from what corner of the world do you watch? A bustling city street or a quiet rural hearth? Your voices weave the fabric of our shared exploration into America's forgotten nightmares. Let us rewind the clock to that fateful spring of 1865, to a plantation gasping its last, and meet the architect of deception, Ezekiel Thorne. The approach to Thornwood was once a grand avenue, flanked by ancient oaks whose limbs intertwined like the fingers of praying hands, symbolizing the old Virginia aristocracy's unyielding grip on power and piety. By April, those trees stood ravaged, hacked for fuel by deserters, their stumps jagged like accusations against the sky. New buds pushed forth defiantly, but the chill wind whispered of judgment, carrying the distant toll of church bells from villages scarred by cannon fire. Ezekiel Thorne lingered on the veranda, his silhouette gaunt against the peeling white columns of the manor house. At 45, war had etched canyons into his face, graying his beard prematurely and hollowing his eyes like sockets in a skull. His frock coat, once tailored in Savannah's finest wool, now hung threadbare, patches sewn with unsteady hands. Boots cracked at the soles, laced with twine scavenged from barn ropes. Thornwood mirrored his decay. Tobacco fields lay fallow, strangled by thistles and kudzu, their soil depleted like the Confederacy's coffers. The slave cabins, though Emancipation's decree had rung out 2 years prior, stood half deserted, doors creaking in the breeze like unanswered prayers. Those who stayed were the forsaken, elders with bent backs, children too frail for flight, the infirm clinging to familiar chains over unknown freedoms. Born into this soil in 1820, Ezekiel had inherited not just land but a legacy of moderate prosperity. His forebears had tilled tobacco that fetched gold in London markets, building a home that echoed with the laughter of kin and the clink of silver. Educated at the University of Virginia, he had embarked on a grand tour in 1840, wandering Europe's cathedrals and galleries. In Rome's Vatican, he knelt before Michelangelo's Pieta, tears tracing his cheeks at the marble's sorrowful grace. In Amsterdam, Rembrandt's The Night Watch enveloped him in its luminous drama, igniting a passion for art as a bridge to the divine. Returning, he envisioned Thornwood as a sanctuary of culture, a salon for poets, a haven for painters rivaling the opulence of Monticello. But fate, that capricious deity, intervened. Market crashes in the 1850s eroded fortunes, the Panic of '57 stripped bare the illusions of stability. Then secession's thunder rolled, and war devoured all. Ezekiel evaded the draft, his heart weakened by a youthful fever, leaving him to witness the erosion from afar. His beloved wife, Eliza, perished from consumption in 1862, her final breaths rattling like leaves in a gale. Sons fell at Antietam, their bodies lost to mass graves. Alone now, he roamed echoing halls, a king of ashes, his dreams curdled into desperation. It was in the dead of a February night, insomnia gnawing like a rat, that inspiration struck, or temptation, depending on one's scripture. Pacing the dim art room upstairs, where meager acquisitions gathered dust, a forged Titian landscape, a murky Dutch still life, he gazed upon them with the hunger of a man starved for redemption. The idea bloomed like forbidden fruit, not to nurture talent, but to fabricate a phenomenon. A prodigy so anomalous, so biblically resonant, that it would command fortunes from collectors craving wonder in wartime woe. And the hook? Disability transmuted into divine gift, echoing Job's trials or Christ's miracles, a boy without hands, painting as if guided by angels. Josiah had come to Thornwood in 1860, amid a lot of 10 souls auctioned in Richmond's grim markets. The seller, a fleeing planter, dumped them cheap amid secession's frenzy. Josiah, then 8, was diminutive, with eyes like polished obsidian, absorbing the world's cruelties. No family noted, just a ledger entry, boy, Josiah. Hands amputated at age 3, cause, machinery accident. Otherwise sound. Discounted. Ezekiel scarcely glanced at him, assigning garden duties where stubs could till soil or weed beds. Yet, over seasons, Josiah's quiet vigilance emerged. He'd linger near Ezekiel reading gazettes on the porch, eyes devouring printed words like manna. When paintings were dusted, he'd freeze in doorways, transfixed, as if the canvases spoke prophecies. One dusk in 1864, Ezekiel discovered etchings in the barn's dirt floor, stick-scratched visions of biblical floods, proportions eerily accurate, perspective defying his youth and handicap. Ezekiel filed it away, a seed for darker cultivation. But the true artisan lurked in shadows, Miriam, 28, born of Thornwood's sins. Her mother, a house servant, her father, Ezekiel's own sire, a truth buried like a thorn in flesh. Fair-skinned, she navigated the plantation's racial limbo, granted literacy in secret by Ezekiel's late mother, small favors amid constant peril. Eliza had despised her, meeting petty torments. Now, with Eliza moldering in the family plot, Miriam endured. Ezekiel uncovered her gift years prior. Creeping the art room at midnight, he found her replicating a Rubens with berry ink and clay pigments on scrapcloth. Punishment beckoned, but fascination stayed his hand. Her strokes, self-taught, captured essence with raw power. He began leaving supplies, oils, brushes, in hidden spots, observing her evolution like a silent god. Now, in April's chill dawn, awaiting his summoned guest, Ezekiel pondered his mosaic, Josiah as facade, Miriam as forge. The plan? Attribute masterpieces to the boy, his miraculous method veiling the truth, evoking tales of saintly afflictions yielding holy art. Themes of redemption, sin's weight, divine justice, perfect for a nation wrestling post-war guilt. A writer crested the hill, Captain Harlan Whitaker, Union blue vivid against drab fields, tasked with inventorying rebel assets for Yankee claims. Ezekiel's letter had baited him, a discovery of immense cultural value, ripe for mutual gain. As Whitaker dismounted, boots crunching gravel like Judgment's footfall, Ezekiel masked desperation with southern grace. Captain, your presence honors this humbled home. What I reveal may redefine Providence itself. Ushering him upstairs, the art room's musty air enveloped them, mildew mingling with varnish ghosts. Whitaker surveyed the walls indifferently, his Midwestern accent clipping words like shears. These your treasures? Ezekiel dismissed them, mere echoes of glory past. No, sir, the revelation awaits. He unveiled 5 canvases, staged with theatrical care. Crafted in a repurposed outbuilding, Miriam's nights fueled by candle and coercion. Subjects, dark biblical vignettes, Cain's fratricide, Lot's flight from Sodom, shadows swallowing forms, light piercing like divine spears. Artificially aged with smoke and cracks, they gleamed with authenticity. I unearthed these hidden away, Ezekiel intoned, voice laced with feigned wonder. Servants whispered of their creator, a boy, enslaved, handless from birth's cruel twist. Yet they beheld him paint, brushes clenched in stumps, birthing beauty from barrenness. Whitaker's scoff, preposterous. Ezekiel countered, until witnessed. Shall we meet him? In the converted studio, linseed's sharp bite replaced smoke's savor. Josiah stood sentinel, frame slight, eyes veiled. Stumps exposed, skin taut over bone nubs. Before him, a half-done canvas, the prodigal son's return, figures emergent from gloom. Demonstrate, Ezekiel urged softly. Josiah, rehearsed to perfection, gripped a brush awkwardly, daubing crude marks illusion enough. Whitaker gaped, awe-cracking skepticism. How, he breathed. Ezekiel, perhaps affliction hones the spirit, as scripture teaches, in weakness, strength perfected. Lies wove seamlessly, tapping era's romanticism, suffering as conduit to genius, God balancing scales. These are his secrets, forbidden fruits of talent suppressed. Now, I seek to share, for stewardship's sake, and survival's. Whitaker's eyes gleamed with opportunity. Verification needed experts. Ezekiel nodded, inwardly scheming controls. As Whitaker departed, promising return, Ezekiel faced Josiah alone. The boy's gaze pierced, knowing, silent accusation. Well done, Ezekiel murmured. Obey, and freedom beckons for you and Miriam. Josiah nodded, departing like a specter. Solitude pressed, Ezekiel amid false masterpieces, guilt's chill coiling like serpents in Eden. Outside, sunset bled crimson over barren earth, symbolizing spilled innocence. In her cabin, Miriam scrubbed pigment from fingers, exhaustion etching her face, pondering betrayal's cost, truth's elusiveness in a world of masters and masks. The inspectors arrived amid a downpour, thunder rumbling like heavenly disapproval. For souls, Professor Elias Hawthorne from William and Mary, versed in Renaissance lore, Theodore Blaine, Richmond's acclaimed landscapist, widow Constance Evergreen, artificionado with purse strings, and a skeptical scribe from the Daily Dispatch. Ezekiel had fortified his facade, more rehearsals with Josiah, teaching varied grips, feigned fatigue, Miriam slaving on progress pieces, her hands blistered, spirit fraying. The group toured the studio, rain pattering like impatient fingers on tin roof. Hawthorne examined canvases, magnifying glass glinting. Remarkable tenebrism, shadows alive with intent. Blaine traced strokes, anatomical fidelity defies novice hands. Evergreen, enraptured, it evokes the soul's turmoil, as if painted by one touched by angels or demons. Then, the performance, Josiah, poised, executed his charade brush-wedged, marks applied with labored grace. Gasps echoed, Hawthorne murmured, miraculous, a modern Lazarus of art. Blaine probed, how do you envision such detail? Josiah, coached silent, let Ezekiel interject, the boy speaks little, his voice is the canvas. Doubts lingered. Blaine noted inconsistencies in technique, but the narrative enchanted. A symbol of resilience, Evergreen declared, amid our fractured union. They departed convinced, whispers of auctions buzzing like bees. Yet cracks formed. Miriam, overhearing, confronted Ezekiel in moonlit barn, this sin will damn us, using the boy as puppet, me as ghost. He retorted, necessity absolves, think of redemption. But her eyes mirrored Josiah's, haunted, foretelling collapse. Word spread to Richmond, the handless Prodigy's debut. Invitations poured, Ezekiel hosted viewings, Josiah performing under watchful eyes. Paintings sold for fortunes, gold coins clinking like Judas's silver. One buyer, a forward general, hung The Fall of Man in his parlor, only to wake screaming from nightmares of serpents coiling from the frame. Ezekiel's coffers swelled, but so did isolation. Nights brought visions, hands severed, accusatory reaching from shadows. Josiah grew withdrawn, his art a yoke. Miriam painted feverishly, her works infused with subconscious rebellion, subtle distortions hinting at deceit. A union major, intrigued, probed deeper, rumors of forgery. Ezekiel deflected, but paranoia bloomed. He confined Josiah, monitored Miriam, weaving tighter the net. Summer's heat baked Thornwood, fields withered like unrepented souls. One eve, a storm brewed, lightning forking like God's finger. Josiah vanished briefly, found sketching in dirt, a crucifixion, thorns crowning a figure resembling Ezekiel. The gallery opening, canvases unveiled to gasps. Critics raved, transcendent. But one viewer, an abolitionist preacher, whispered, this feels unholy. Art born of chains mocks the creator. Sales soared, but omens mounted. A buyer fell ill, claiming the painting watched him. Another's home burned, canvas unscathed amid ashes. Ezekiel, flush yet fractured, confided to his journal, have I invited retribution? The boy's eyes judge me as Cain. Miriam plotted escape, but loyalty to Josiah bound her. We're pawns in his hell, she told the boy. He nodded, first words, God sees. The blaze came sudden, July's inferno, flames devouring Thornwood like Sodom's fate. Ezekiel escaped, but records perished. Josiah and Miriam? Vanished, whispers claiming they fled north, or perished in divine fire. The paintings? Scattered, some destroyed in fits of madness. Survivors lurk in attics, their gaze eternal. This tale echoes eternally, of ambition's hubris, exploitation's curse, and art's power to reveal or conceal the soul's darkest recesses. In Josiah's miracles, we glimpse biblical truths. What profit a man to gain the world and lose his soul? As the sun clawed its way over the horizon in that fateful May of 1865, Thornwood Plantation awoke to a tension thick as morning fog rolling off the James River. The air carried the earthy musk of damp soil mingled with the faint, bitter residue of gun smoke from battles long faded but never forgotten. Leaves rustled like whispered confessions in the wind, and distant crows caught accusations from skeletal oaks, their branches clawing at the sky as if pleading for mercy. Inside the converted smokehouse, now a makeshift temple of creation, the scent of linseed oil and turpentine hung heavy, a sacrament to the fraud unfolding. Ezekiel Thorne, his face etched with the pallor of sleepless nights, paced the creaking floorboards, his boots echoing like the ticking of a doomsday clock. He had orchestrated this symphony of deception, but now, with experts circling like vultures over carrion, the notes threatened to sour into discord. The plan had evolved into a precarious dance, balancing on the knife edge of exposure. Miriam, the hidden virtuoso, had toiled through moonless hours, her fingers, slender yet calloused from years of unseen labor, cramping into claws as she layered pigments onto canvases. Her eyes, shadowed by exhaustion's bruise-like rings, burned with a mix of resentment and resolve. She painted scenes drawn from the Good Book, Samson toppling the temple pillars, a metaphor for the crumbling Confederacy, Jonah emerging from the whale's belly, symbolizing futile escape from divine judgment, and the binding of Isaac, where Abraham's raised knife mirrored Ezekiel's own moral sacrifices. These were not mere illustrations, they pulsed with psychological torment, shadows swallowing figures in a chiaroscuro that evoked the soul's eternal struggle against sin. Victorian sensibilities would lap them up, edifying tales of faith triumphing over adversity, yet Miriam infused them with subtle subversion, a hidden plea in every stroke, as if the canvases themselves whispered of bondage unbroken. By day, Josiah played his role in this unholy theater. Fetched from his pallet in the dim quarters, where straw prickled his skin like thorns of conscience, he was positioned before the easel. His stumps, smooth and unyielding as polished bone, wedged brushes with a dexterity born of necessity. He made deliberate marks, simple daubs that hinted at form, enough to convince watchful eyes of progress. Ezekiel hovered, his voice a velvet murmur of false encouragement. "Steady now, boy. Let the Spirit guide you." But it was all facade. At dusk, as Ezekiel retreated to the manor's echoing halls where portraits of ancestors glared down in silent judgment, Miriam slipped in through a concealed panel, her footsteps muffled by rags tied to her shoes. Candle flames danced like restless spirits, casting elongated shadows that twisted across walls scarred by years of smoke. She worked feverishly, her breaths shallow and ragged, transforming Josiah's rudimentary scratches into masterpieces. Layers of glaze built depth, highlights caught imagined light, and the biblical figures emerged with haunting realism, eyes that seemed to follow the viewer, laden with unspoken accusations of complicity. This rhythm was a grindstone, wearing them down. Miriam's hands trembled, knuckles swelling like penance knots, Josiah's arms ached with phantom pains, echoes of his lost limbs mirroring the phantom art he created. Yet they endured, bound by the invisible chains of survival. Emancipation's ink was dry, but freedom's reality was a mirage in this lawless Virginia, where night riders still enforced old hierarchies under cover of darkness. Ezekiel's scheme promised a sliver of hope, or so he dangled it, like the serpent's fruit in Eden. The evaluators descended like apostles seeking signs and wonders. Professor Elias Hawthorne arrived first, a gaunt figure in his late 50s, spectacles perched on a beak-like nose, his expression a perpetual furrow of doubt honed by decades dissecting Renaissance fakes in dimly lit academies. He carried a leather satchel bulging with tools, magnifying lenses ground to precision, scrapers for pigment samples, even a small vial of solvents to test authenticity. "Extraordinary claims," he intoned, his voice dry as parchment, "demand unyielding scrutiny." He pored over the canvases in the upstairs gallery, where dust motes swirled in shafts of sunlight like divine particles. His lens hovered over brushstrokes, tracing the play of light and shadow that mimicked Caravaggio's dramatic intensity. Anatomy flowed with lifelike grace, and muscles tensed in eternal struggle, veins pulsing beneath translucent skin. Impressive, Hawthorne conceded, his tone laced with grudging respect. The tenebrism rivals the Baroque greats. Proportions suggest rigorous study. But his brow creased deeper. Yet, anomalies persist. Confidence wavers, bold sweeps here, tentative hesitations there. As if multiple spirits vied for control of the brush. Ezekiel's pulse thrummed like a war drum, but his facade held. "The boy's affliction breeds inconsistency," he replied, words smooth as oiled silk. "Pain ebbs and flows like tides of tribulation. Some days, grace descends, others, the flesh rebels. It's the crucible that forges his genius, suffering as the refiner's fire, as scripture attests." Hawthorne nodded slowly, his skepticism cracking under the narrative's allure. In this post-war haze, where the nation groped for symbols of renewal, a maimed ex-slave channeling heavenly art was manna for the soul-starved. Redemption from the sins of slavery, transcendence over bodily ruin, it resonated like a hymn in a bombed-out chapel. "I must witness the act," Hawthorne declared. "Prolonged observation, across days if need be." By all means, Ezekiel assented, though dread coiled in his gut like a viper. The studio awaits. That afternoon, the smokehouse became a stage under scrutiny. A fresh canvas bore a charcoal outline of the Annunciation, Gabriel's wings unfurling like judgment's decree, Mary's face a mask of awe-tinged terror. The experts arrayed themselves, Hawthorne scrutinizing from a stool, Theodore Blaine sketching furiously with charcoal-smudged fingers, Widow Constance Evergreen dabbing tears with a lace handkerchief, her bosom heaving with empathetic sobs. Josiah stood sentinel, brush clamped in his nubs, movements labored yet intentional. He added flex to the angel's robe, stepping back with furrowed brow, as if communing with unseen muses. The charade held because the foundation was Miriam's nocturnal labor, composition laid, forms modeled, colors harmonized in subtle gradients. Josiah merely embellished surface flourishes that masked the miracle's true source. Hawthorne observed for hours, his notes filling pages with precise diagrams. Blaine murmured awe, a revolutionary method, disability birthing innovation, like Job's trials yielding wisdom. Evergreen wept openly, its poetic justice, the meek inheriting artistic earth. But Hawthorne's whisper chilled the air, is this Genesis or mere polish? Could another hand lurk in shadows? Ezekiel's blood-iced, but Evergreen bristled, blasphemy. Behold the focus, the fervor. This is no ruse, it's providence manifest. Thoroughness demands proof, Hawthorne countered. A virgin canvas, from inception. We dictate the theme, we watch unbroken. Ezekiel's gamble, as you wish. Tomorrow, dawn's light shall reveal all. Night fell like a shroud, stars veiled by clouds heavy with unspoken omens. In the smokehouse, Miriam awaited, her form a ghost in flickering candlelight. Ezekiel burst in, voice a urgent hiss, they insist on Genesis. Observed. Hawthorne selects at morn a full vigil. Her pallor deepened, eyes wide as a doe's in torchlight. Madness. Josiah can't conjure alone, I can't paint under gaze. Thus, adaptation, Ezekiel schemed, outlining the ruse's escalation, a ballet of swaps and slights. Timing razor-sharp, diversions subtle as serpent's guile. Miriam's face cycled fear to resignation, Josiah would be the pivot, memorizing strokes for relay. You're toying with damnation, she warned, voice trembling like autumn leaves. This web ensnares us all, sins compounding like interest on Judas's silver. Ezekiel met her gaze, unyielding. Refusal invites ruin. Cooperate, and bounty awaits land, liberty, a new dawn. A velvet lie, sweet as forbidden honey, to bind her will. She acquiesced, shoulders sagging under invisible yoke. Ezekiel departed into the chill, all hoots mocking his steps, lonely heralds of forsaken souls. Guilt gnawed deeper, a worm in his core, whispering of hubris, playing creator, exploiting the afflicted, perverting art's sacred flame. Yet necessity armored him, survival in Reconstruction's wilderness demanded such thorns. Miriam, in her cabin's gloom, walls thin as faith's veneer, stared at her hands, instruments of beauty, now tools of deceit. Father's elegance, mother's resilience, twisted into erasure. Flight tempted her, northward paths under Union's banner, but perils loomed, vigilantes' nooses, starvation's grip, the freedman's bureau a sieve against chaos. So she persisted, complicit in her vanishing, painting shadows that hid her light. Josiah, on his smokehouse pallet, straw whispering secrets, gazed at rafters spiderwebbed like fate's design. He comprehended the farce, Miriam's mastery, his puppetry, Ezekiel's greed. Age 12, yet wisdom bloomed from observation's soil. This lie empowered him, eyes upon him, influential souls who might shatter chains if truth pierced. He plotted silently, biding like David before Goliath, awaiting the sling's moment. As midnight tolled in distant bells, 3 souls lay vigilant, trapped in ambition's forge, forging chains of their own. Richmond buzzed with tales, miraculous cripple artist, legends swelling like storm clouds. The deception ballooned, momentum inexorable, threatening to consume its architect in retributive fire. Dawn broke crisp, frost glazing fields like sin's veneer. Hawthorne arrived with reinforcements, Blaine, Evergreen, plus scribe Samuel Hargrove from the Richmond Dispatch, notebook poised, eyes gleaming with scoop scent, and a historical society envoy, bespectacled and solemn as a prophet. Ezekiel proffered coffee, aromatic rarity, steam curling like incense on the veranda. Your diligence honors us. Doubt shall dissolve in daylight. They processed to the smokehouse, breaths pluming in chill. Josiah awaited beside blank canvas, easel bathed in eastern glow, pure, unforgiving. A modest motif, Hawthorne decreed, gesturing to a corner tableau, pewter pitcher glinting coldly, apple bruised like fallen Eden's fruit, loaf torn as Christ's body, knife blade winking menace. Still life tests illumination, form, depth. Josiah eyed the array, throat bobbing, nerves raw as exposed sinew. No pre-work, authenticity's crucible. His method merits note, Ezekiel interjected. Pain mandates pauses, crowds unsettle his spirit. Privacy in respite. Hawthorne weighed compassion against rigor. Shifts, then duo vigilant always. Rotation spares the lad. Josiah commenced, charcoal gripped, outlines emerged, crude yet cogent, proportions passable, relations spatial. Observers mesmerized, Evergreen's tears tracing cheeks, Hargrove's quill scratching furiously, Blaine analyzing grips. An hour lapsed, Josiah faltered, breaths labored, fatigue genuine from focus's toll. Respite, Ezekiel declared. Quarter hour, sustenance. Hawthorne assented, canvas guarded, we duo remain. Ezekiel escorted Josiah to adjacent shed, ostensible sanctuary, actual nexus. Miriam lurked within, shadows. Cloaking her like a confessor's veil. Recount, she urged. Josiah relayed, placements precise, angles exact, memory sharp as engraver's burin. Miriam's canvas mirrored size, brushes flew recreating, elevating. Light danced on picture, shadow cradled apple, texture rendered loaf's crumb, knife's edge a moral razor. 12 minutes birthed foundation, professional polish veiling origins. Flawless, Ezekiel breathed. Now, the exchange. Peril peaked, guards eyed canvas unblinking. But structure favored fraud rear portal, silent on oiled hinges, angled blind spot from window's glare. Miriam glided, canvas shrouded. Front discourse distracted, Hawthorne and Blaine debating Baroque influences. She darted, lift, swap, second slight, phantom swift. Retreat seamless, original concealed. Ezekiel and Josiah re-entered, guards oblivious, canvas unchanged. Josiah resumed, now embellishing mastery, daubs enhancing, illusion intact. Experts marveled, Hawthorne's doubt thawing, inconceivable, yet evident. As sun climbed, the painting bloomed, still life alive with symbolism, apples rot hinting mortality, knife's gleam evoking sacrifice, pitcher pouring grace unmerited. Miriam's touch infused spiritual chill, objects seeming to judge, whispering of deception's doom. By midday, conviction solidified. Hargrove's notes brimmed, prodigy proven, divine compensation for earthly woes. Evergreen pledged patronage, a beacon for our repentant self. Yet Ezekiel sensed the precipice, lies layered like varnish, cracking inevitable. Josiah's eyes met his, knowing, patient, a silent vow of reckoning. Miriam, hidden, felt the weight, her art, another's glory, God's ledger unbalanced. The session adjourned amid acclaim, but omens lingered, clouds gathering like wrathful hosts. Rumors raced to Richmond, handless seer, paintings prophesying. Sales beckoned, but so did exposure's specter, divine justice circling, ready to strike the proud. In this web, threads tightened, guilt's noose, sin's snare, redemption's distant mirage. Thornwood saga deepened, a parable of hubris where creation courted destruction, and the handless boy's gift masked a curse eternal. The still life concluded not with fanfare, but with a hushed awe that bordered on reverence. 3 grueling days in the smokehouse had unfolded like a passion play, Josiah laboring under watchful eyes, his stumps guiding the brush in measured, almost prayerful increments, adding a gleam to the apple's bruised skin, sharpening the jug's shadow into a dagger of darkness, refining the bread's torn edge until it seemed to crumble under invisible weight. Each touch appeared modest, yet cumulatively transformative. The observers, Professor Hawthorne with his magnifying glass hovering like a surgeon's tool, Blaine sketching furiously, Evergreen weeping into her lace, saw transcendence. A child, maimed by cruel fortune, forging beauty from nothing through sheer will and celestial favor. They witnessed what they desperately needed, proof that suffering could birth genius, that the war's wreckage might yield something holy. But it was illusion, meticulously staged. Miriam's nocturnal labors, hours bent over prepped foundations in the shed's stifling gloom, had already sculpted form, balanced light, layered glazes that caught the soul. Josiah merely adorned the masterpiece, his simple strokes crowning what another had suffered to create. The cumulative effect dazzled because the difficult labor was concealed, the true agony born in darkness. By the third day's close, the canvas stood complete, pitcher reflecting muted dawn, apple radiating quiet rot, bread offering sustenance laced with sacrifice, knife poised like Abraham's blade. Not Rembrandt reborn, yet undeniably professional, technique assured, composition resonant with moral weight. Hawthorne stepped forward, spectacles fogged with emotion he refused to name. "This defies reason," he murmured. "Every principle of art insists it cannot be. Yet I watched every mark. Every hesitant pause. Every labored breath." Evergreen's voice trembled with conviction. "We behold grace beyond comprehension. The Almighty has touched this boy, compensated loss with divine endowment, as he did for the afflicted in Scripture." Crawford, the journalist, already envisioned headlines blazing across Richmond, "The handless prodigy, a testament to human spirit in our nation's darkest hour." His pen scratched furiously, ambition burned in his eyes. Evergreen declared purchases on the spot, 3 canvases at princely sums. Others followed. The deception had crossed the threshold from precarious gamble to glittering success. Yet triumph carried venom, the story swelled beyond Ezekiel's grasp. Visitors descended daily, collectors in fine broadcloth, curiosity seekers in threadbare homespun, preachers seeking signs of providence. A daguerreotypist arrived, tripod and chemicals in tow, intent on capturing the miracle in motion. Ezekiel orchestrated swaps endlessly, Miriam darting through shadows like a thief in the temple, Josiah performing exhaustion with heartbreaking authenticity, signals passed in glances sharper than knives. The toll mounted visibly. Miriam's hands shook with tremors that no massage could still, her eyes, once bright with secret passion, dulled to ash. Josiah thinned to bone and shadow, cheeks hollowed by sleepless strain and meals forgotten in performance's grip. Ezekiel drowned nerves in rye whiskey, his sleep fractured by visions of hands severed, accusatory, reaching from canvases to clutch his throat. Wealth flowed like manna after famine. Evergreen's $800 purchase dwarfed 2 years' tobacco yield. Northern offers trickled in, a Richmond gallery proposed exhibition. Talk turned to New York, Boston, prices that could resurrect Thornwood entirely. Ezekiel should have rejoiced. Instead, he stood on the precipice, sensing the ground tremble. Success had invited scrutiny, the one predator his lie could not outrun. The reckoning arrived unheralded on a late May Tuesday, sky leaden with unshed rain. Reverend Marcus Hayes dismounted a weary bay gelding, his black coat dust-streaked, face carved by sun and conviction. A circuit preacher from the Blue Ridge foothills, he carried no pomp, only the quiet authority of one who had buried boys in shallow graves and heard widows confess despair. "I've heard tales that test faith," Hayes said, voice measured. "Stories of a child painting as the masters did, without hands. I came to see truth, not spectacle." Ezekiel extended hospitality, though unease coiled like smoke. "Observe as you will. The boy fatigues easily under so many eyes." Hayes sought audience, not performance. In the smokehouse's dim sanctum, he sat across from Josiah on a rough bench, gaze gentle yet unyielding. "Your name, son?" "Josiah, sir." "Age?" 12. "When did the gift awaken?" Josiah glanced at Ezekiel, rehearsed lines flickering. "Some years back, sir." "Found old paints, tried them." "Who guided you?" "No one, sir. Just practice." Hayes leaned closer. "What stirs in your heart when you paint? What do you seek to say?" Silence stretched, taut as bowstring. Josiah's neutrality cracked, uncertainty flickered. Ezekiel interjected, "The boy speaks little of process. It's instinct, reverent, pure, untaught." Hayes held Josiah's gaze. "I'd hear it from him." Long pause. Josiah's shoulders tensed. "I try to make what's in my head look real. Like it's alive." Simple words, yet they carried weight, sincerity piercing artifice. Hayes nodded, rose. "Thank you, son." In the gallery, Hayes studied canvases with ministerial scrutiny. "Extraordinary," he conceded. Then, softly, "Yet I sense concealment. 20 years hearing confessions teach a man to recognize unspoken truth. Something here is hidden, perhaps innocent, perhaps grievous. Know this, if exploitation touches this child, I will unearth it." No overt accusation, yet the warning landed like Scripture's judgment. Ezekiel's denial rang hollow even to himself. No deception exists. The gift is real, I merely steward it. Hayes departed with measured promise, I pray you're right, for both your souls. Alone amid silent witnesses, his fraudulent masterpieces, Ezekiel poured whiskey with unsteady hand. Success had birthed its opposite, exposure's shadow lengthening. Hayes possessed moral gravity, public trust. Investigation could unravel everything. Weeks blurred into fevered momentum. The Richmond exhibition opened June 15 in a surviving Franklin Street gallery, 3 stories of soot-scarred brick that had once echoed with secessionist toasts. Now it hosted paradox, Union blue mingling with Confederate morning black, Northern correspondents jostling Southern dowagers, all drawn to 17 biblical visions attributed to a handless prodigy. Crowds swelled past 200 on opening night. Gas lamps hissed, perfume and pomade mingled with the faint char of old fires. Ezekiel, groomed in his least patched suit, accepted congratulations with practiced humility, the enlightened patron elevating the downtrodden. Inside, terror-gnawed, Josiah stood exhibited in a corner, clean linens failing to mask gauntness, stumps bared like stigmata. Strangers pressed close, fingering fabric, murmuring prayers, staring as if divinity might transfer through touch. Josiah endured, eyes distant, resentment banked but burning. Miriam remained banished to Thornwood, erased, invisible, paid $50 hush money Ezekiel never intended to augment. She waited in shadows, hands idle for the first time in months, conscience stirring. Press lauded, miracle of spirit, Rembrandt reborn in chains, Providence amid ruin. Sales erupted, Evergreen claimed 3 more, a Massachusetts General 2, Baltimore Merchants 4. Ezekiel's coffers swelled past $3,000, riches unimaginable a season prior. Yet acclaim sharpened peril. Experts clamored for deeper analysis, journalists demanded Josiah's voice. Hayes returned thrice, inquiries pointed, former servants recalled no early talent, only sudden emergence amid Ezekiel's desperation. Style inconsistencies betrayed broad mastery, Baroque drama beside Dutch restraint, suggesting tutelage from one versed in European canons. Someone traveled, studied, Hayes murmured. Someone who knows the masters intimately. Ezekiel deflected, sweat cold on his spine. Natural mimicry. The boy's gift absorbs styles like scripture absorbs truth. Hayes's eyes never wavered. Or assistance from one who has seen them firsthand. The chasm between suspicion and proof was Ezekiel's sole shield, thin, fraying. Then Jonathan Pierce, New York dealer in tailored charcoal, arrived with Gilded Temptation, national tour, demonstrations in Manhattan ballrooms, Boston salons, perhaps Paris. We'll auction to tycoons. You'll share handsomely. Dream incarnate, escape from Virginia's ghosts, wealth eternal. Yet impossible, constant observation would expose the choreography within days. Ezekiel stalled, I must consider. Pierce's parting shot, if the boy is genuine, we both prosper. If not. Threat lingered like gunpowder scent. Returning to Thornwood under gathering dusk, Ezekiel found Miriam on the manor porch, a boundary breached, defiance manifest. Inside the gallery, amid her own creations, she faced him. I'm finished. The words struck like hammer on anvil. You cannot. I will not paint further. No more invisible labor while you profit, while Josiah suffers spectacle, while this lie devours us. Promises of shares rang false, $50 insult burned. Half, she demanded. Half of all, past, future, in legal bond. Freedom to depart at will. One final series to honor commitments, then I vanish. Ezekiel's protest died. Acknowledgement doomed the enterprise, refusal invited exposure. Miriam's threat carried weight, her word to Hayes, to press doubt alone could poison value, shatter reputation. They stood surrounded by silent accusers, paintings born of coercion, glowing with stolen light. Miriam's eyes held no hatred, only weary finality. Agree, she said, or watch it all burn. Ezekiel felt the precipice crumble. The web he wove now ensnared him utterly, success a gilded cage, truth the key that would destroy it. Divine justice, long patient, stirred. The handless boy's miracle had summoned its opposite, not redemption, but reckoning. And in the gathering storm, 3 souls, master, maker, marionette, awaited the lightning's fall. Ezekiel Thorne sat alone in the gallery as twilight bled through cracked shutters, the room growing dimmer with each passing minute. The paintings, Miriam's masterpieces, hung like silent judges, their biblical figures gazing down with eyes that seemed to follow his every breath. Abraham's knife hovered eternally above Isaac, Judas's silver glinted in betrayal's shadow, the prodigal son knelt in rags that now felt like Ezekiel's own tattered pride. He had built an empire on stolen light, and now that empire pressed against his ribs like a stone. Miriam's ultimatum echoed, half the proceeds, inked and witnessed, or exposure. Refusal meant her voice in every parlor, every newspaper, doubt spreading like rot in damp canvas. Discrediting her carried peril, forcing her invited catastrophe. So he chose the devil he knew, agreement, temporary. 2 months, he rasped. Fulfill the commitments. Then you walk free, with your share. She studied him, suspicion carving lines around her mouth, then nodded once. 2 months. No more. And the contract legal, binding, or I speak tonight. When she left, the door's soft click sounded final as a coffin lid. Ezekiel poured rye with shaking hands, the liquor burning a path to hollow places inside. He stared into the amber depths and saw not salvation, but the slow fracture of everything he had constructed. Reverend Hayes's quiet warnings, Pierce's gilded trap of a tour, Josiah's watchful silence, Miriam's gathering resolve, all threads pulling tighter. The deception no longer belonged to him, it breathed on its own, fed by belief, hunger, and the post-war thirst for miracles. Desperation birthed darkness. Dawn found him riding hard to Richmond, dust choking the road like unspoken sins. First, the lawyer, crisp parchment, careful clauses, Miriam's name etched beside his in reluctant partnership. Signed, sealed, witnessed. Then, a shadowed office above a pawnshop, the doctor, once respectable, now trading ethics for coin. A certificate, Ezekiel murmured. Declaring a woman of unsound mind. Delusional accusations. Unreliable testimony. The doctor's eyes narrowed. The painting boy. The rumors. Protection, Ezekiel insisted. Jealousy threatened something pure. A price named, gold changed hands. 2 days later, parchment arrived, official ink branding Miriam unstable, her words the ravings of a fractured mind. Insurance, Ezekiel told himself. Prudence. Yet the document felt like poison in his pocket, another line crossed, another soul silenced before she could speak. At Thornwood, Josiah sat before blank canvas in the smokehouse, brush idle between stumps. Practice, Ezekiel had ordered, but the boy merely stared. Exhaustion etched his young face, awareness sharpened his gaze. Miriam had taught him in stolen moments how light falls, how shadow shapes form, how composition carries meaning. She had seen him, not as prop but person. Now he pondered endings. What became of exploited souls when the curtain fell? He possessed no plan, only patience, the quiet certainty that traps could be sprung from within. Summer thickened. Tobacco withered in fields, cicadas screamed judgment from dying oaks. Richmond buzzed with the boy artist legend, parlors alive with wonder, galleries thick with buyers. The lie sustained itself, drawing oxygen from collective longing for redemption after war's carnage. Then came Thursday, late July. Heat pressed like a hand over mouth and nose. Night fell heavy, stars obscured. Flames erupted without warning, first aglow in the smokehouse, then roar. Whether candle overturned, lantern shattered, deliberate match, or heaven's verdict, none could say. By discovery, inferno consumed all, smokehouse devoured, outbuildings ablaze, quarters crackling, manor house groaning as timbers surrendered. Ezekiel woke to acrid choking, shouts piercing drunken haze. He staggered onto the porch, sky orange, heat searing skin. People fled in panic, former enslaved, a handful of loyal holdovers, dragging children, salvaging scraps. Josiah. Ezekiel bellowed. Where's the boy? No answer. Smokehouse a furnace wall, no approach possible. Miriam. Empty quarters, possessions gone, contract vanished with her. Dawn revealed devastation, blackened skeleton of manor, ash drifts like gray snow, chimney stacks leaning drunkenly.
Ezekiel stood amid ruins, soot-streaked, eyes bloodshot.
Wealth resided in Richmond galleries, yet without Josiah's demonstrations, without new works, value would crater.
The charade ended not in glory, but cinders.
Reverend Hayes arrived midday with churchmen bearing aid blankets, bread, water.
He found Ezekiel on charred steps, staring vacantly.
"I grieve your loss," Hayes said, sympathy laced with something sterner.
"It's finished," Ezekiel muttered.
"Perhaps," Hayes replied softly, "this is Providence closing what should never have opened."
"You accuse me of arson?" "I accuse nothing."
"Truth finds its path, sometimes through fire."
Days unraveled the myth.
Journalists probed, inconsistencies multiplied. Former residents whispered of midnight painting in the smokehouse, not by a boy, but a woman. Experts scrutinized canvases anew, stylistic variances, European fluency beyond child's grasp.
Doubts metastasized.
Refunds demanded, gallery distanced, headlines shifted from miracle to mystery. 3 weeks post-fire, a letter reached the Richmond Examiner, careful script, signed Lena Thorne. It laid bare the fraud, coercion, rehearsals, switches, exploitation of boy and hidden artist. Contract enclosed, preparatory sketches matched finished works, affidavits from Thornwood witnesses.
Corroborated. Devastating. Irrefutable.
Ezekiel countered with the certificate, Miriam delusional, vengeful. But evidence overwhelmed, desperation undermined him.
Within a month, ruin absolute.
Financially bled by lawsuits, socially exiled pariah who stole from the vulnerable, mocked Providence. He searched for Miriam, offering bribes for recantation, but she had vanished. Philadelphia whispers, Western trails, new name, new life.
Josiah surfaced 2 months later via Freedmen's Bureau in Washington, escaped fraud, seeking education.
Quiet testimony confirmed Lena's account, rehearsals, performances, prop existence. "I want to learn," he told officials.
"Read. Write. Perhaps paint truly one day."
Placed with educators, he faded into ordinary life, teacher, husband, father. Census fragments suggest Elias Norton, instructor of freed children, skilled in drawing instruction because of his disability. Died 1911, age 58, life of purpose quietly claimed.
Ezekiel lingered in Thornwood's remnants, a surviving cabin, vegetable patch, bottle after bottle.
3 years of slow dissolution, heart failure in 1868, despair the true cause.
Buried beside wife and sons, stone bare of epitaph.
The paintings endured strangely. Most collectors burned or banished them, some preserved, drawn to the scandal's gravity.
As decades passed, attitudes shifted, recognition of erased black artistry, disabled resilience.
Historians traced Lena, Philadelphia, married, children, art teacher to freed communities.
Died 1891, age 52.
Obituary gentle, scandal a footnote, legacy her quiet instruction. Surviving canvases, fewer than 10, hang in modest museums, light masterful, composition honest, emotion raw. Not divine prodigies, but human triumphs born of secrecy, sustained through oppression.
In 2015, Richmond Museum mounted The Invisible Artist, Lena Thorne and the Thornwood Fraud.
Full narrative unveiled, not miraculous boy, but exploited woman and child.
Crowds modest, praise for confronting history's erasures. A comment book entry, anonymous, beauty from horror. Truth, however brutal, must be told.
So ends not with tidy moral, but layered truth.
Paintings exist, tainted yet genuine, troubling yet skilled. They compel questions: whose labor counts? Whose story prevails? How do the exploited reclaim narrative? Lena and Josiah did reclaim theirs, not through vengeance, but persistence.
Escaped the lie's cage, built lives of dignity. The boy who never painted like Rembrandt became the man who taught others to see. The woman denied credit became the teacher who passed vision forward. Their legacy whispers, survival is resistance, truth outlasts deception, even in chains, the human spirit finds ways to paint its own ending. What remains are the canvases, silent, haunting, beautiful.
Witnesses to fraud, yes, but also to unyielding talent, to two souls who refused erasure.
And in their quiet persistence, perhaps the truest miracle of all.